Thank you. Thanks for having me. I've never spoke at this event. I've known about it for quite a while. I see a lot of familiar faces and colleagues and ex-colleagues and friends around. So thank you. I'm excited to be here. I think the topic of ethics is an important one, certainly to everyone in this room, important one to me. And people define it in a lot of different ways. You could poll the room and you would get 50 or 100 different definitions of ethics. And it gets a lot of airtime. There's a lot of facets to it. But what I want to talk about is, I'll call it ethical leadership. I want to tie ethics into leadership and how I view the roles and responsibilities of a leader and how that relates back to ethics and some things I think leaders should do and should have forefront and some of the ways they should conduct themselves and their employees and their businesses, and try to tie that together to ethics. And then I hope you get some questions in the end, because I don't think you want to hear me speak for 50 minutes, but I'm told it needs to be 50 minutes for a lot of reasons. So, look, two components of ethical leadership that I want to go through. The first called a common vision, and it's ironic that Robert was talking about vision. In fact, I think he hacked into my computer and saw my notes, because I had, the North Star as the vision. So I'm going to change that word in my remarks here on the fly. But I've got a similar concept. So common vision. What is a vision? Why do people and companies and organizations and communities have those? And then secondly, influence. How do we influence organizations to turn that vision into reality and really execute the vision? So what's a vision? What's a common vision? And then how do you influence the organization to make that happen and scroll that forward and turn that into execution? So the power of a common vision. To me, it's a critical component of leadership. Leaders have to communicate the vision. And there's a lot of risk around that. A lot of times people don't want to do that, because to put out a bold vision or mission statement comes with a lot of risk. What if you put it out there and you don't achieve it? I'll go through some examples of some ones I think that are very powerful, but there's a lot of risk around that. It's simpler just to be quiet about it and say, well, people understand the vision, they know the mission, they know where we're going, they can get there. It's understood throughout the organization. But when you really put it out there and put it on the front page and put it in your annual letter, put it on your elevator to your employees and mention it a lot, it's a lot of risk. So I think that's one of the reasons why people don't do it. And the vision, it gives people the ability to see things as you want them to be. Give them a path of where they're going, how we're going to get there, what the future looks like. It's easiest for all of us to work in organizations every day and manage our employees and go about our business. But if you're really trying to accomplish something profound and impactful, then you need that vision of where you're trying to take the organization. And yes, it's going to change every once in a while. It shouldn't change every quarter, even every year. But there will be times when you need to make modifications. And I think that's perfectly acceptable, but it must be communicated to the organization, and communicate often. We were actually talking at the table about one of the topics here, and the question of ethics came up, and what if you're asked to do something unethical? And someone here had a good comment is, if your organization is ethical and you think you're communicating that enough, or they understand the values of the business, so you think you're communicating that enough, you need to multiply that communication by a factor of 10. And it's true, and I've actually used that same analogy during some of the restructurings and crisis that went through an organization. If you think you're communicating to the organization enough during tough times, multiply it by a factor of 10. If you think you should have a company meeting, once a quarter, no. If you think you should send an email once a quarter, no. It really multiply it by 10. So we had that same discussion at our table, not related, but you have to communicate it often. So however often you think you're communicating it, multiply it by a factor. And I'm not going to get into the details of specifically the vision of our company, Sandwich's vision. I do want to talk about some other examples and how we've used it, but I want to reference how the vision applies to not just organizations, but communities and people and even families. So vision statements are intended to be aspirational. They're goals. They're the North Star, as he used. Some people call them the lighthouse, and they're meant to stand the test of time. There's some really neat ones that I've found that I like. You'll recognize all these companies. These are ones that I think have stood the test of time, brands you all recognize. And the words, are impactful. So just think about Southwest Airlines, to become the world's most loved, most flown, and most profitable airline. Very simple, very succinct. You can get employees engaged around that. You've all been on flights, wonderful flights in and out of Oklahoma City with dozens of delays, but I will say, Southwest makes it as pleasant as any airline I've been on in the world. And so it's a powerful little vision statement there. So, the founders at Herb Keller and others set out mission statements, and they want the employees to strive towards that goal. And I think they do an excellent job of it. Habitat for Humanity, a world where everyone has a decent place to live, easy to understand, great vision. Everyone in the world has a decent place to live. Huge, huge goal, right? Huge goal. Very aspirational, but very simple and very profound. Zappos, a company I'm a big fan of. If you're ever in Las Vegas and get a chance to take a tour of their headquarters, it's a pretty fascinating experience. They offer free tours. One day, this is theirs. One day, 30% of all retail transactions in the U.S. will be online. People buy from the company with the best service and best selection. Zappos will be that online store. Wow, 30% of all transactions. What's the retail industry? Someone here might know. $1 trillion a year, and they're going to capture 30% of that. That's pretty big and pretty bold. I'd say they've done a great job of that. But again, that's that powerful mission statement or vision or principles, guiding principles. The terms are all similar, and I think they mean something similar. I choose the word vision. We use the word vision around our company, and I like the term common vision. And there's an interesting, really great definition. I like to define these things as we talk about them. So what do we mean by vision? And I say it's the ability to provide others a path or sight of where you want to end up. So provide others a path or sight to where you want to end up. And that path might change. It actually usually does. The vision at our company stayed similar, but the path on how we get there can change drastically. We might be drilling in some part of the country, we might drill in another, we might have different assets, we might sell and divest things, but the vision of where we're trying to take the company doesn't change. So it's an invitation really to the employees and to the staff and the stakeholders, and it can be a tremendous motivator in terms of getting people going in the same direction. So I think as leaders, we have to come up with a vision and have to be bold enough to communicate that. And bold enough to put one out there that's aspirational. The ones I read, whether it's home for everyone or the best airline in the world or 30% of all retail sales, those are aspirational. But as leaders, that's part of our job. So the second piece of it, if you establish your vision and where you're trying to take the organization and get people rallied behind it, how do you get people behind it? So you can communicate, you can come up with, you can have a task force, a team, come up with this great vision and mission statement. Publicize it, communicate it 10 times more than you think you need to, but how do you get people around it and to move around it? And that's really influence. How do we as leaders and managers influence the organization? So I think ethical leaders really use persuasion to try to influence others. We share our vision of the future and how we want to get there and invite people to come along. I think the most effective leaders will communicate that strategy and vision, and people will choose to come along. You want them to choose. I want to talk about different ways to influence people, but if people make their own choice, okay, this is the direction I'm going to go, I see that this is the right path forward, I'm going to make that choice, you get a much more engaged employee, much more powerful workforce, you get much more out of your organization than some other styles of influence, which I want to talk about. And look, there are some leaders, and I'll use the term unethical, there's some unethical leaders that rely on fear tactics and intimidation to get people to go in the right direction. And it may not be completely overt, the methods they use, and I think I want to go through a couple examples and a couple of my experiences with some leaders. But again, I like defining the terms here. So I would say influence is the power to change or affect change in something. The power to change or affect change in something. And a lot of times it's without directly forcing it to happen. So the power to affect change is something without directly enforcing it to happen. And so if we all think about who has the greatest influence on our life, maybe you break it up into one's personal and one's professional, who had the greatest influence on your life, it's likely going to be someone that didn't use a coercive or manipulative approach to influencing you, right? It's likely going to be someone that had more of a persuasive approach, more of a communication style. So as I think about the people that have been influential in my life, it's the ones that had that care about people, that weren't trying to manipulate, weren't trying to drive fear through different organizations. On a professional level, someone who's done an incredible job at our organization, and he's sitting here with me at the table, and he likes to be talked about publicly about as much as I do. So I know he's not going to like this, but it's worth saying, and it needs to be said. It's Scott Griffin, who runs our People and Culture group. We called it HR for a long time, and a lot of places do, and nomenclature for it's fine. But he and I were talking one day, and we said, I remember we were on the phone. I was driving home, driving down Wilshire, and we're saying, well, that name, is that the right name for organization? Are we trying to develop our human resources? Yes, but what are we really trying to do? We're trying to develop our people and develop our culture. So we came up with this term. I was literally on the drive right there in Wilshire, right in front of Wilshire Gun. I remember where I was, almost going over the train tracks, when we said, let's call it People and Culture. And it stuck. And we said, well, let's sleep on it. Let's make sure we're not crazy, and let's sleep on it for a day or so. And then a day or two later, we said, that's it. We hit on it. It's perfect. People and Culture. And so through that and through Scott's role in leadership in the organization, he's been incredibly valuable at driving the culture of the business. I mean, he's had a real influence on the organization. He doesn't come in and say, you will be here at 8 o'clock, or I'm going to fine or fire you. He said, you will be nice to your employees, or you're going to get reprimanded. We will have a culture of sharing and open communication, or you're fired. No. We influence people. So let's talk about that. It's not just in setting the culture, but we've had our share of challenging times in the oil and gas industry. Everyone's subscribed to the paper in Oklahoma. We went through a restructuring, emerged last October. Painful time for the industry as a whole, and a lot of our peer companies here in Oklahoma and throughout the country. We had to have sizable reductions in our workforce. Very rough numbers, 2,000 to 500 people. And over that time, we had to let go a lot of people we cared deeply about and who were friends, which is really hard to do. So people ask the question, the easy question, what's the hardest thing you have to do as a leader? And it's absolutely that. It's letting go really good people. That's the hardest thing you have to do. When it's no fault of their own, it's industry circumstances or company specific. So we had to make some really hard decisions. And through that, Scott was consistent in saying, does the way we're handling this convey the respect and appreciation and dignity that those people have earned and that they deserve? So all the decisions we're making, and also, is that consistent with who we are as an organization? So as we're making some of these changes, we said, okay, are we treating people the way that they need to be treated? And is this consistent with our values and beliefs as an organization? All the decisions we had to make, we would have those two guideposts up to make sure that we were staying within our bounds of the culture and the principles of our organization. And Scott was a huge driver of that. Without that, we would have missed some things. We absolutely would have missed some things. Very, very small example. We had a big staff reduction, and it looked like it was coming at the end of the month, and no one really thought much about it. And you try to figure out the right timing. Anything to be timed right. It's always terrible timing. Always terrible. And Scott says, wait a minute. If we do it, the 28th, healthcare only goes through the end of the month, just the way it works through the healthcare plan. People are going to have 2 or 3 days to find new health care. Let's push it a week and do it on the 1st, so they have 30 days to get new health care. Wow, great idea. None of us thought of that. It seems very simple, but big impact on people's lives, having two days to go find health care versus having 28 or 30. Small things like that to make sure that we're taking care of our people to the best we could. So, and he didn't just make that, it wasn't about compliance. It was making that the standard for the organization. So that's in our DNA and in our culture now. The decisions we make, because of Scott's influence, we're thinking about the people always. How does this impact the organization? We have business decisions to make. We have to deliver returns for our shareholders, but we can't do that without the right employees and without engaged employees. And for us, it's our job to have a genuine care for those employees. And so on this personal and professional level, Scott was incredibly influential in doing this, and his really passion for life, his even sense of humor. called it the other day, the Scott Griffin humor that some people get, some people don't. And his genuine interest in others had a big influence on our organization. So how we influence organizations is important. And you got to be careful when you're talking about influence. How do you handle it? How do you handle people? So think of this example. Let's say that we're a company and we're trying to convince our employees not to text and drive, or you're a member of a nonprofit, or maybe your family. You're sitting down with the family and saying, look, don't text and drive. You can do it several different ways. Let's talk about this influence. You can have a very coercive style with it. You will not text and drive, or I'm going to fire you. You get fines. You're going to lose your license. You're going to go to jail. And some of those things are true. But that's very coercive and works in some situations. You could be a little more manipulative, if you want to use that term, and pull on people's emotions. You can show pictures of a family who was orphaned, kids who were orphaned by someone text and drive and hit their parents, and terrible accident scenes and all this to try to pull an emotional response from people. Or you can be persuasive. You can invite people to come along with you, which is what we've tried to do in the culture there. Invite people to come along. Let me explain why the dangers around texting and driving. There's 1.2 million accidents a year and 300,000 deaths attributed to texting and driving. And you've all seen all the statistics. It's 6 more times likely than drinking and driving to get in an accident. All these things. And you can appeal to people's reason and logic and give them their own vision, and they'll make the decision. Because if you're just using coercion, when no one's looking, people aren't going to comply. They're not going to follow. So it's one example we've used of different styles, manipulation, coercion, or persuasion in terms of having influence on people. Because again, tying this back to ethical leadership, we as leaders have influence on the organization. Scott had incredible influence on our people and culture department, how we've managed to change, we think, and instill the culture in the organization. And on me, on a personal level, I would say that, some people say, who had the big influence on your life? My grandfather had a big influence on me. He lived out of state, but I'd go visit him a lot. And hard working, never graduated high school, tough guy, Golden Gloves boxer, 6'2", built his own sand and gravel company and concrete business, which in the Northeast and union environment's a tough spot. But really taught me the value of working hard on the Saturdays. You'd have to get up and work. I think 8 to noon or so. And I worked for a sand and gravel company in the summers, doing real hard manual labor. And I was the grandson of the owner, so I could do whatever I want. But he has me out there, scraping concrete. And the hardest job I ever had. Someone asked, "What's the hardest job you ever had?" It's getting inside of my grandfather's, we call them Duff, the cement mixers. You guys seen the cement mixers driving down the road? And jackhammering out the dried concrete. And so this was his grandson, and so this tiny little manhole, it's about this big, you take the screws off, and it's hot in there, very hot, even in Boston in the summer. This was in the Northeast in Boston. So climb in there with a jackhammer, and and you got to hold it up, so it's a 50-pound jackhammer or so, and you're holding it up, chiseling off the concrete. So that was, instilled, a really strong work ethic, which everyone's got stories of grandparents and others that taught him how to work hard. But he had a big influence on me in that regard. And then 2 other things he did. One time I made a box just out of wood to hold something. I don't remember what it was. And I was little. I was probably the age of my kids. I've got kids that are 12, and 8, all boys. So I was probably 8. And I, made it, threw it together, nailed it, and said, okay, I've got the, I was doing nails or something. And he said, no, you're not done. It's a box. He's like, no, the edges, are all out of alignment. It's overlapping. Your nails are all off center. You just do it together. He said, the last 20% of any job is the hardest, and the last 10% is usually harder than the previous 90. He said, go do the remaining 20%. And I was little. I was like, God, what a pain in the rear this is. But obviously I remember that. 40 years later. And so, again, very big influence. Just with small little words, the influence he had on me. And then one other just personal story. And I think a couple people in the audience might know this, but they might not even. I was minutes away from going in the Navy. I mean, minutes. So I was in high school, wasn't doing great and got in trouble for this or that, and was living with my dad, and things were a little turmoil. And I was a little angry, and I said, well, I'm joining the Navy. I'm just doing it. Dad, I've talked to the recruiter a couple times. I took the test. I did fine on it. I'm joining the Navy. So you need to come home from work early and go with me because you have to sign with me because I was under 18. He's like, sure, what are you talking about? Are you sure you want to do this? And so he agrees to come home early from work. He worked far away, drove all the way. This is in Dallas. He drove all the way up to Plano with me, at 3 or 4 o'clock to meet the recruiter. I go up to the second story. I remember I could picture it vividly. It's the second floor, Navy recruiter, they're all in a row there. And the woman who I'd been talking to was going to see her, and I'm signing to go in the Navy. Would have gone in 9 months later, a year later after high school. And she wasn't there. And there was a sign on the door that said, we'll return tomorrow at 8 a.m. or something. I'm getting back to my grandfather in a second. But my dad, he's a little annoyed, drove all the way from work. Why isn't she there? I didn't know why she wasn't there. Just left early that day. Anyway, my dad calls my grandfather because he knows he's a big factor in my life and said, hey, my name was Jimmy then. I'll give you a little secret. It was Jimmy. So he said, Jimmy's, it doesn't have to be repeated. He can stay. Jimmy is joining the Navy. I'm not sure exactly what he said because I wasn't there when they had the conversation, but it was something like that. Will you please talk some sense into him? So my grandfather calls back, and this is the phone on the wall. So the phone rings, and you walk in the kitchen and get it. You remember the long cord and all that good stuff. Wasn't even that long ago, but and so he talks to me about, look, I hear you're ready to enlist. And I said, yes, I want to do this. And he said, well, let me give you a couple things. I did it. He did it. He did it. He went in the Marines, and let me tell you what's going to happen. You think you're going to go to college, and you want to enlist, so they'll help pay for college, which is one of the main reasons I wanted to do that, get the GI Bill. But he said, don't do it. Go to college first. We can find a way to pay for it. We'll help you if we have to, but go to college first. You can always go in the service later. Go in as an officer, do something else. But that phone call that night from him, and the fact that there was some divine intervention going on there somewhere. The recruiter wasn't there. Recruiters they just will leave early usually most days. Recruiter wasn't there. My grandfather talked me out of it, so led me on a different path. I ended up going to college. Did not serve like I know a lot of people did. Eli here did. David did. Several others. I didn't serve. A ton of respect for those who did. My dad did, but I didn't go in because of the influence of my grandfather. So I haven't told that story publicly many times, and it just goes to show there's a lot of zigs and zags in your career and your life path, and you never know, whose influence is going to guide you what direction. Obviously, I had some positive influence there that guided me, I think, in a good direction. I do think sometimes what life would have been like if that recruiter would have been there, and I would have joined the Navy at 18, right out of high school. I wonder about that sometimes. But obviously pretty pleased with the way things have turned out. And also, an influence, let me touch on something. I think people can really influence you. So talk about some positive influences, right? Whether it's Scott or my grandfather, my personal life, and we all have positive influence in our life. But some can influence you in pretty negative ways. And it catches people off guard when I say this, but when people say, hey, what are some lessons you've learned from some people you've worked with or other leaders? And my answer, it's really this. I've learned more from bad leaders and managers than I have from good, because I've really paid attention to what they've done. And so, a couple examples that I've used before. I was earlier in my career in an oil and gas company. I was VP finance. We didn't have a CFO, so I was kind of the de facto head finance person there. Had a very aggressive boss, profound language all the time, raised his voice, demeaning to people, always led from a point of fear. And I knew that, and it bounced off my skin. I'm fine with it. But as I went through my couple years there, his influence on me was greater than I knew. And I had a time when I was negotiating a deal. We're trying to buy another oil and gas business. Negotiating a deal, talking to a banker, and he changed the terms or something. I was pretty heated about it. So I'm in the hallway, walking up and down, talking to this banker, using some language that I wouldn't use these days. And I was 30-ish, something, just to use age, not that matters all that much. But using some language that probably wasn't appropriate. And raising my voice at this banker. And I remember one of our accountants kind of sticks her head out of the window and looks like this and looks back, and I thought, that was an odd look. I wonder why she's looking at me like that. And I continued to run down the hall and yell at this guy. But so then later that day, someone who reported to me in the accounting department said, hey, James, the way you were talking in the hall that day, would rub some people the wrong way. That wasn't really professional. And I thought, wow, you are so right. I can't believe I was doing that. And again, it wasn't my boss's fault. I'm not blaming him at all. These are my actions. But that culture he was creating of we're going to intimidate people, we're going to yell, we're going to throw things if we have to. If you don't get it done, you're fired. That culture he was creating was rubbing off on me, and I didn't even know it. And right then, and I really thanked this person who reported to me, he took a lot of risk for saying that, right? He reported to me, he took a lot of risk, personally, professionally, saying that, and I thank him all the time for it. But again, that self-awareness, like I said, I've learned more from some of the poor leaders. That was an example of someone having influence on me in a negative way, but fortunately I saw it and quickly changed paths. Hopefully I think I can say I've never raised my voice or yelled like that since then. Maybe to my kids, but probably not in a work environment. And another boss of mine would say, he'd kind of ask you to do something, put something together, and you'd explain, well, I don't know if that's really needed because we already have this other stuff, and do we really need it? Is that really relevant? Do we need to do that? And you'd have a little debate about it. And he said, I set your bonus, don't you? So I suggest you do what I say. Yeah, I set your bonus, so I suggest you do what I say. Wow, what an odd way to lead that is. Sure, he got the desired result. I did what he asked, but he's dragging me along by a chain, right, or leading by this coercion and fear. And yes, you can get things done for a short period of time that way, but can you build a sustainable, decades-long business and career and enterprise that way? No, not at all. And you can build a business and have some success and ups and downs, maybe get lucky with the market, but you're not going to build a real sustainable team or build a franchise by treating people that way. There's time to have harsh words with people, I'm sure, but threatening them with, and it's a veiled threat. By the way, I set your bonus, so I suggest you do what I say. Yeah, I would never say that to someone. It's not the right way to lead and influence people. So I still do pay attention to those things and learned a lot. And I think people do think they react an odd way, think it's an odd answer when I say some of my best learnings have been from watching what not to do from others and being very self-aware of how they were treating people and the influence they were having on me and others, and make sure it didn't rub off in the negative way. We talked about the texting and driving, the coercion, manipulation, but persuasion is the better way. Had he said, look, James, I know you don't see the value in this, but let me explain why we need it. Let me explain why this is going to help. It was something for board directors. Let me explain why this is going to help the board understand our business, and maybe there's a better way to show it, but they like to see it this way, and let's do this together to get them over this hump, and then next time we'll look at a different way to do it, but let's get it done this way this time. That would have been a much more beneficial approach than saying, I set your bonus, so do what I say. And look, there are times when you're going to have to use somewhat of a coercive approach, right? I keep mentioning kids. We have to use it with our kids, right? And then back to texting and driving, that's probably is the approach for the kids. You text and drive, you're going to lose it all. But sometimes some of those approaches are needed. But I tell you, the hard part as a leader is knowing when to use which one and how much. When do you use some of that coercion, if you want to call it that. We do have to say as leaders sometimes, team, I'm sorry you don't see it this way, but this is just how we have to do it. But if that's your default mechanism, I think you're going to lack a lot in your professional development and the kind of team that you can create around you. It's a big difference, a team of people, any one of these tables coming together with a common goal with, if you don't get it right, I'm going to fire you or cut your bonus, versus persuading you on the vision and how we're going to get there together and leading from the front. Big difference. So I like to keep those in mind when I'm thinking about organizations and developing organizations and building our companies. So let's think about some other examples of people with really strong vision and then some level of influence around it. Some names everyone in the room will recognize. Someone I talk about at work from time to time, Steve Jobs. Everyone in the room knows who he is. He died at age 56. When he passed away, Harvard Business Review said that he had transformed 7 industries. And I don't have to quote everything about Steve Jobs because there's plenty of books. You can Google him and read for days or months. Transformed 7 industries. Personal computing, cell phones, animated movies, music, tablets, retailing, and digital publishing is the last one. Transformed 7 industries. I'm trying to think of people who transform one industry. Maybe Elon Musk is going to do it, and maybe Henry Ford did it in a different fashion 100 years ago. But just transformed one industry, much less 7. So he and Steve Wozniak had a vision of what the personal computer can do. And back when they created the Apple II, Jobs was just barely 21 years old. And actually, the Apple II is the first computer I ever used, so it kind of got some personal ties to it. And I remember my lunch in school, I would wolf down my food and then go to the computer lab, because you could do that after you ate, go to the computer lab and just play around with the Apple II and just program it, do little things. And there wasn't a disk drive in it. So I'd make a little program and do something, and then it would just be gone. And then they finally got a disk drive so I could save my little program that would come up and ask you your name and all these things. But I was fascinated by computers at a young age. But think of what Steve Jobs, because of his vision, right? Incredible vision. He said he wanted to put a dent in the universe. I mean, who makes statements like that? Who can even think of that? But who's bold enough to say you want to make a dent in the universe? Wow. That's what he said when he was trying to hire the CEO who worked for Pepsi. He said, do you want to make sugar water, or do you want to make a dent in the universe? And about his vision, talking about his vision, when he said, I'm not going to ask customers what they want, because by the time I deliver it, they're going to want something else. I'm going to anticipate what they want and get it to them. And so what's Apple's market cap? 800 billion? Is it more these days? 900 billion? Something like that? Incredible business. So again, someone with a lot of vision and a lot of charisma. Look, there's a lot of, I study him a little bit. There's a lot of things he could have done differently, and he used coercion management style. If you read some of the books, probably as much as anyone we know. But incredible charisma and incredible vision, just incredible vision, and then influence on people for decades. Influence on people for decades. Look, another one that's going to be closer to home for us. Let's talk about people who had a strong vision and a big influence. Aubrey McClendon, right? So, was 56 years old when he passed away last March. Most of us in the room remember that day. I know I will. It'll be up there with the shuttle crash and other days. Ronald Reagan getting shot. Just 9/11 things that stick in your head. But yeah, getting the call, actually from our general counsel, who's in here, who said Aubrey passed away a little bit before it hit the news. That was tough for a lot of us here. But let's think about his vision. And there's a lot of Chesapeake and ex-Chesapeake employees in here and AEP employees. But let's think about his vision that he had, for one, his company, right? I mean, transform the way we develop oil and gas in the country, set natural gas on a different trajectory, put the United States back on the map, and him and some others, not just him solely, but put the United States back on the global map in terms of energy production. Natural gas at the time, now crude oil. I mean, we're going to be one of the leading producers. A lot of the vision that he and some others had. And I was fortunate to spend a bit of time with him. Never worked for him directly, but got to spend quite a few meals with him, usually just getting grilled with questions the whole time. Every once in a while I could sneak one in, but it was the one-way interview. But he had a big influence on me, and I got to ask him questions. I was a young CEO, just took this job, and I would say, hey, how are you? You were a young CEO. How did you deal with some of the challenges and balance your family life and travels? And great advice from a really powerful leader. And he had obviously a big vision for the city, right, and for Oklahoma. I mean, you can't. Let's just think about, we leave here, you drive here, you're going to drive past the boathouse, maybe you'll go to Class and Curve soon. and see that. You got the Museum of Art, the ballet, the public schools, boys and girls clubs, other nonprofits. The school my kids go to, the building they're in is named after him. So the vision he had for Oklahoma and what he could do, what we collectively could do, him and others, other leaders, to make the city a better place, improve the quality of life, improve the education, up the level of competition in the city across the board. Huge, huge vision for that. I mean, that takes a lot of courage to put that out there and stick to the goal for years and years and years, even decades. And again, he had a lot of influence on a lot of different people. So those are two kind of professional examples that are widely known. Whether you agree or disagree with the way both those gentlemen went about everything they did, you can't argue that they had incredible vision and a lot of influence, and influenced hundreds, thousands, in some cases millions of people through different ways. And some examples of some influences directly on my life and how those tie in. So as you're thinking about yourself, what can we do to take this vision, this ethical leadership with vision and influence into our organizations? I think it's incumbent upon us to communicate effectively that vision, and to make sure that we have the right influence on others, the right kind of influence. So, some people say, what do you want to be remembered with, James, or what are you trying to build and create? And I say, I want to create a lasting business that survives decades past when I'm gone. I think that's one of the measures of a great leader is you can walk out the door and the business thrives and excels for decades to come, which is certainly, obviously been the case with Apple in a big way. Can we create an organization that thrives for decades after we're gone? And as leaders, if we create that vision, have that influence, we can do that. So it's incumbent upon us to really share this vision with our organizations. And it could apply to family, community organizations, nonprofits. It doesn't have to be just business-centric. I think it applies a lot to business. I think there's value in having a mission statement and some vision for families even. How do I want my kids to be raised? What environment do I want them to be in? But as it ties back to business, we got a lot of leaders and leadership positions in this room and others that will ascend to leadership positions throughout your career. Don't underestimate the importance of having that concrete vision and sharing it. And think about how we can have very impactful visions. Can I say I'm going to make a dent in the universe? Probably not. They're probably stretching it a little bit. But how can you push yourselves? How can we all keep pushing ourselves and pushing our organizations in a constructive manner? Not from a point of fear, not threatening people with their bonuses, but from a position of persuasion and influence. There's a little personal story. And I'm getting closer to wrapping up, but I took my kids on a vacation, and I know in Oklahoma, I've been here almost 7 years, but I've heard you're not supposed to talk about that state to the south of us that's on the other side of the Red River. But I took my kids down to San Antonio for 4th of July. So we're down there and doing all the amusement parks and stuff and just having fun. And we went to the Alamo, which I'm sure a lot of people have. Went to the Alamo and walking around the Alamo, taking the tour, and you watch a video and you see the cannons, and the kids love the cannons and all this stuff. And you're walking through and you see some of the memoirs and things that were happening. And then I stumble on, my boys right with me, a letter that Travis wrote, Lieutenant Colonel William Travis. So he died, that would have been March 6th, March 6th of 1836 at the Alamo. So he was in charge there. There were two of them in charge, but he took the lead. The other was sick. If you guys all have seen the history story, probably read the movie. So he died at 26. But anyway, there was a letter that he wrote. He wrote a series of letters as they were in the Alamo, and they'd have couriers send them out, asking for help and other things. But I'm going to read a little bit of this letter because I think this is just fascinating and talks about vision or courage and influence. So there's a little bit of a lead into the letter, and then it says, "The enemy has demanded surrender at discretion. Otherwise, the garrison will put us to the sword if the fort is taken. I have answered the demand with a cannon shot, and our flag still waves proudly. I shall never surrender or retreat." And then he has a couple sentences where he asks for aid. Send us help, we're here. And then, this is the best part. "The enemy is receiving reinforcements daily and will no doubt increase to 3,000 or 4,000 in 4 or 5 days." So here it's him and 200 other soldiers and some families in the Alamo, increasing to 2,000 or 3,000, 3,000 or 4,000 in 4 or 5 days. If the cause is neglected, I am determined to sustain myself as long as possible and die like a soldier who never forgets what is due to his honor and that of his country. And then he signs it, victory or death. And that's where that victory or death comes from. So here's someone that had so much courage. And I think about that. I text this to my dad. I said, Dad, I took a picture of it. You remember this. Someone had so much courage to say that, 200 guys, 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 coming around him. I'm going to stay here and die like a soldier. Victory or death. So who has that kind of passion and courage these days? A lot of soldiers do. Us, we're never put in that position to have to make those kind of sacrifices, those kind of decisions. But being there with my kids, it was really powerful. And I had them, I said, guys, read this. The bigger ones, the little guy was just kind of running around. It didn't quite resonate with him. But the bigger boys, I said, read this and look at what he said and think about how much courage, and you want to tie that back to ethics or whatever you want to, but he was leading a group of people. And that you hear the term victory or death, but that's where it came from, that letter he wrote. I think it was March 4th or so. Don't quote me exactly on the dates. It was a few days before the Alamo fell. And that letter finally made its way to the Texans. And I'm by no means an historian. I'm very much a novice at this, but I love it. It made its way to the Texans, and the Alamo had already fallen. But that letter, that victory or death slogan, carried them into the next battle where they defeated Santa Anna, and you read about all the rest. But that letter really engaged and motivated the rest of the Texans to go, defeat the Mexicans. So neat story for me, and great experience with my boys, and a nice little moment with my boys. And also text a picture to my dad, took a picture of the letter and texted it to him. And I said something similar. This kind of courage. My dad had a great little response. He said 100% soldier, and that's all he said in his text reply back, which I thought was just great. So look, my experience, as you saw from the background, is largely financial. I was in the financial community doing oil and gas the entire time, degree in finance with some accounting, and have been in oil and gas my entire career. Sam Ridge brought me to Oklahoma City about 7 years ago. Family and I love it here. Great place to live. We don't plan on going anywhere else. Great people, very welcoming, and great business community. And I love it that there's an ethics forum here and an ethics discussion every month. I think it's missing from the organizations. Again, there's so many different ways to define ethics, and you ask us all and you're going to get 99 different answers. But there's several key components of it, and the one I wanted to focus on was ethical leadership. How can we be ethical leaders? Make the right decisions, tell the truth, be transparent. Yes, but in these two areas of vision, let's have a common vision. And I'll close with one thing on the common vision. Who here knows General Tommy Franks? Or know who? Just a little General Tommy Franks. Know him? Know who? If you saw his picture on the picture, you'd know him. And if you saw the video of him with President Bush addressing after the Gulf War, but he's got a great definition of vision. I'll close with this. And he was 38 years in the Army, retired 4-star general. His last post was, I think, the commander of the U.S. Central Command, which was 25 nations in the Middle East. But here's what he says vision is. And I'm a big fan of General Franks, and he's got a group called 4-Star Leadership that he supports, and I encourage people to Google that, take a look at it to get a chance. But vision is the ability to see where you want to end up and how to get there, is the ability to move beyond your present reality and to accomplish something noteworthy. When you truly hold a vision, it becomes a tremendous motivator. When a team of people are able to rally around a common vision, it can be a powerful movement. That's how General Tommy Franks defined vision. So I think that's one of my favorite definitions of it. I keep it and I quote it and I attribute it to him, but a very good definition. When a team of people are able, the very last part, a team of people are able to rally around a common vision, it can be a powerful movement. Again, why I think that vision is important in organizations. I want to close on that. I would love to take some questions. How are we doing on time? We're not good on time?
Maybe one question, depending on how long your answer is.
Okay, Thomas Hill.
So, James, you talk about influential leadership, and obviously one of the benefits of coercive leadership is you can tell people to do what you want them to do and do whatever you want to do. But as an influential leader, and I assume that's your primary style, tell us a little bit about how you feel about the separation of your personal life and your business life, and whether those can actually be different.
Yeah, so Thomas's question was, is a position of leadership, how do you separate your business and personal life, and can those be different? When I lived in New York and Houston, yes, it's New York, it's easy to keep them different, and you probably want to keep them different when you live in New York. But you know, as I get further in your career and you have families and your coworkers have family, no, I don't think there has to be a giant line between personal and work. I don't. There's some things that people want to keep private, and you got to respect that, but I like having relationships with people that I work with, whether, you know, our kids do things or we see each other outside of work or we'll take a trip together. I think that's healthy and constructive. So no, for me personally, I like having more of an involvement and engagement with my employees than just on a work level. And I don't mind bringing, you know, personal things into the work environment. I don't know. And again, it gets back to the culture and what do you create, what do you reward, what do you allow. But that's something that we actually embrace. We had bring your kids to work, family day just the other day, everyone brought their kids in. It was great, but good question. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for having me.